Hey, it's Matt Robeson, and here's our latest episode of Political Rehab. This is the show that's kind of a mashup of PTI Meets The Daily Show, where a Republican named Matt and me, a Democrat who's also named Matt, try our best to have a good time with the week's news. We blast Trump, we hit the top stories, do our weekly That's Bullshit segment, and always end with a dose of hope. And I'm very happy that this episode is going out on the Blue Amp Cliff's Edge YouTube channel, also on my YouTube, Worth Knowing with Matt Robeson, and on my Substack, also called Worth Knowing with Matt Robeson. So I hope wherever you're finding us, you'll hit subscribe to support this kind of work, especially over on the Worth Knowing YouTube. That really helps us out. And let me say, I'm live with you right now, but the rest of this episode was previously recorded. Here we go.
Is so much unilateral power in the hands of a tech billionaire to shape these kinds of life or death wartime conditions.
Come on, guys. As Republicans, stop being so fucking weird on shit.
A major revelation, a possible smoking gun, emerged over the past week. It may have already become a headline-grabbing story.
Nations don't fall apart because people argue. They fall apart when people stop believing the argument is worth having.
Welcome to Political Rehab, smart politics without the hangover. I'm Matt.
And I'm Matt.
Today, a State of the Union snoozy, salacious stemwinder, AI government surveillance, Musk tilting the war in Ukraine, America on the brink of war in Iran, and a smoking gun emerges from the Epstein files. But let's start, as always, with our Trump dump.
Time for the Trump dump.
That's right. It's time for the Trump dump, because it doesn't matter if you're a Republican, Democrat, or independent. There's something Donald Trump did this week that really pissed you off.
And this week, I want to talk about failure and the surprising way that I learned that President Donald Trump's State of the Union speech was an immediate and epic one. I'm talking about the self-evident truth that it is a failure by definition to devote so much energy to attacking half the country in a speech about the State of the Union. He called Democrats crazy, sick people who should be ashamed of yourselves. Devoting half a State of the Union speech to driving a red-hot spike into the heart of said union is not just the definition of irony, but the depths of depravity and the essence of failure. And where did I learn that lesson best? From a Republican. Longtime viewers know our mutual friend, Alicia Preston, another Republican political consultant, who pointed out that as Biden's physical capacities diminished, as his ability to speak clearly and coherently diminished, a core responsibility of the presidency diminished. And I had to grant that she was right about that. Presidents do many things, but we elect them in no small part to inspire, comfort, remind us that we were founded out of a realization that we were better off together despite our differences. And in fact, we needed one another if we were to survive. And that's still true. Presidents have asked what we could do for our country, urged us not to fear, felt our pain, prodded us toward the shining city on a hill, and warned us of the soft bigotry of diminished expectations. And yet, Trump devoted the entire middle of his speech not to vision, but to venom, not to mention setting up gotcha political stunts, like when he said that every member of Congress should stand up who agrees that the first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens. And as an aside, of course, the total idiot she is, Representative Ilhan Omar took the bait and started screaming at Trump and handed him another one of the exact visuals that he wanted. These were dumb traps meant to put Democrats on the spot. What's really crazy? Tragic, really. If Trump had really wanted to put Democrats on the spot, he wouldn't have tried to make them jeer at him. He would have forced them to cheer for him. If he had said, while presidents before me, from Bill Clinton to Barack Obama, have shown that the president of the United States has the authority to act to protect our country, I may choose to do so now in Iran. And I believe that Democrats mostly agree with me, that this murderous regime that menaces its neighbors and our allies and the whole world with its nuclear capability needs to be contained. So that's why I want the Congress to work with me so that Americans can show a united front to the world. That would have been hard to argue with. In other words, if Trump had actually fulfilled his duty, his oath, done his job, and tried to unify in the State of the Union, it would have been better for him, better for America, and actually worse for the Democrats. It's often been said that Trump can be his own worst enemy. It's probably true. And I don't care if he drags himself down due to his own flaws. But for patriotic Americans, we should be outraged if he drags down the rest of us with him.
This week, I want to talk about tariffs. The Supreme Court handed Donald Trump a gift. an exit ramp, a way out of a policy disaster that is hurting the very people he claims to be fighting for. And instead of taking the win, instead of pivoting, recalibrating, leading, he doubled down. Tariffs are not tough. They're not patriotic. They're not America first. They are a tax. They are a massive tax on the American people. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York made it clear roughly 90% of Trump's tariffs are paid by American consumers and American companies, not China, not Europe, not some foreign villain, but American families. It's your grocery bill, your car payment, your small business inventory. Tariffs are protectionism dressed up as patriotism. They're government interference in free markets. They are the opposite of conservative economic, and Americans don't want them. The court gave them a way out. It gave them the ability to say, fine, we tried it. The system pushed back. Let's move forward. That's leadership. Instead, he pivoted to a new tariff scheme. First 10%, then he floated going all the way up to 15%, just because he can, because he doesn't want to look like he blinked, because backing down feels like weakness to him. But here's the truth. The role of the president isn't to win every ego battle. It's to serve the American people. And right now, families are stretched. Inflation fatigue is real. Small businesses are squeezed. And Republicans are walking into a brutal midterm environment. And Trump seems oblivious to what voters are feeling, oblivious to the economic pressure, oblivious to the political consequences. The Supreme Court handed him a political and economic lifeline. Take the damn win. Don't double down on bad policy because you're having a temper tantrum. Don't keep inflicting pain on Americans just to prove you're tough. Real strength is knowing when to pivot. This was the moment, and instead, we got more taxes.
With that, let's get to this week's rundown. As if an hour and 47 minutes wasn't enough, we have to spend just 3 more talking about this week's State of the Union address. Trump delivered what many Republicans are calling peak Trump, joking and theatrical and culture war heavy, bringing out the U.S. men's hockey team, touting falling energy prices, which isn't a thing. Republican aides apparently are privately celebrating what they see as a relatively disciplined and on-message Trump. But early polling suggests that while Republican viewers may have liked it, Trump may be at his ceiling, and it may be all downhill from here because State of the Union speeches don't tend to have a lasting impact. Matt, you're a Republican insider. What are Republicans feeling about this? And what do you think the real impact of this boring, snoozy, salacious State of the Union was?
Look, if you are a Trump supporter, this was a home run. You loved everything about this. I want to pick up on something you actually said earlier. He was disciplined. First of all, that is a home run for Trump, but it's a sad state of affairs when the biggest compliment we can give is that he didn't screw up and make any mistakes, that he could read a teleprompter. That's how low we've come on this as far as what we are seeing and what American expectations of Donald Trump are right now. This was a political speech. This is the kind of speech you give in late October. It was a horrible State of the Union speech. But where this really impacts us is the MAGA coalition was fragile to begin with. This speech appealed to a very small subset of them that will think this is the greatest thing in the world. But from an electoral standpoint, and the moment that he could have met, which he failed to meet right now, is only going to hurt us long term because the stunts played right into this stuff. The effect of this is minimal.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a very minor MAGA flash in the pan. The snap polling afterwards showed that only 38% of viewers were very positive. Now, that's a down in the weeds number about it, but that's a lower level than Trump's previous State of the Union's congressional addresses. It was lower than Biden's 2022 State of the Union. That says that he did his level best. This was his best shot at being on brand, on message, delivering a campaign rally style, like 30-second ad setup speech. And it didn't really excite people very much. Polling also shows that Democrats are way more enthusiastic about voting in the midterms. Trump's approval is extraordinarily low and downward cratering consistently. He's now underwater on every single issue, including border security, that's being measured by pollsters. History says that there will be a very short-term polling bump, but there's going to be no lasting positive effect from this.
I have talked a little bit on air about surveillance, but Congress right now is scrambling to renew the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which allows warrantless foreign intelligence collection that can sweep up America's communications. The Pentagon is also racing to deploy advanced AI systems that can move at machine speed on the battlefield. So one fight is about renewing surveillance authority. The other is automated warfare, but it's really the same debate. How much unchecked power should national security apparatus have in a world where technology now acts faster than lawmakers? This feels like how soon before Schwarzenegger comes back looking for John Connor?
Yeah, this is deeply disturbing. It has the potential as one issue to actually unite MAGA people and Democrats who are worried about civil liberties. When we originally gave enhanced surveillance authority post 9/11, there were abuses. We've now reached a point where technology has outstripped even those concerns, and the ability of police, of ICE to use facial recognition software. It's not just on the battlefield, it's happening domestically. And we already have Republicans losing their minds over members of Congress, senators being swept up in surveillance, in FBI surveillance. And they're losing their minds about that on the one hand, but they want to empower the federal government, these deep state that they abhor, to do even more of this. There is the potential, I think, for a coalition going across party lines to say, we need to take a long pause on this. Now, whether that'll happen, I don't know. We're so dysfunctional in Congress. I'm not sure we will. But the fact that there's a MAGA fracture on this gives me a little glimmer of hope that we're going to take a breath here.
Yeah, as a conservative, I think we've long been scared of government power. Pre-Trump, we would be losing our fucking minds over this thing. We would be screaming over this stuff. And the thing that I ask all my friends, all my conservatives out there, and all those who are in the MAGA movement is keep in mind, what would your reaction been if Joe Biden was doing some of this stuff? You would be going ballistic. And Trump is not going to be president forever. We do run a real risk of destroying our rights, our freedoms, and our privileges, because you may like this with what's happening, but once they start matching gun records, they start matching your conservative views, and they start attacking you, this becomes an issue. And this is something that should be bipartisan for everyone, because it is a through line that unites us, the protection of our rights and liberties.
Speaking of tech and power and freedom, there were two developments in the Ukraine war, which just passed its really sad 4-year anniversary. First, the White House envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are leading the negotiations both in the emerging Iran war and in negotiations over whether there's going to be some kind of a ceasefire or peace deal in Ukraine. But second, a new report indicates that Elon Musk shut off the Starlink internet satellite service for Russian forces, causing immediate communications chaos, which shows how individual billionaires and informal non-state actors are wielding incredible power, sometimes through the force of technology, to shape geopolitical outcomes. What concerns you most in all of this?
Quite frankly, I'm surprised that it's taken 4 years for Elon to shut this thing off. What's he been doing? It felt like this could have been something a long time ago. There's talk next week that we're going to have another meeting with everyone. There was a conversation this week with Trump and Zelensky. I think in order to solve this, Zelensky would have to give up stuff. And I think that's also just flat out anti-American. As Americans, and I've talked about this a lot in some of my writings, that is a responsibility of America. We need to protect democracies, even ones that have their problems, and there are obvious problems in Ukraine. But it is the role and responsibility of the United States. And quite frankly, we should be doing more to push Russia out.
It's stupid on the face of it to have Kushner and Witkoff leading your negotiations in two different fronts. But the big story here is the Starlink one. Let's not lose sight of the fact that This was a decision not by NATO, not by the Pentagon, not by the president of the United States. As far as we know, it was a private tech CEO who decided to take this major hand, and it had immediate consequences. Right afterwards, a Russian soldier was quoted saying, "All we have left now are radios, cables, and pigeons." The immediate impact was that Ukrainian forces retook 77 square miles of territory immediately afterwards because of Russian battlefield confusion. And it not only begs the question that you posed of why the fuck didn't this happen earlier, but also why is so much unilateral power in the hands of a tech billionaire to shape these kinds of life or death wartime conditions? And why, if Trump is so dedicated to ending the war in Ukraine, didn't he call up his buddy Elon when he was right down the hall running Doge a year ago and say, shut this off? Let's work hand in glove with the Ukrainian side to win this war for Ukraine and get Russia the hell out of there. This is a deep story, and I think there's a lot more to come on it.
Yeah, agreed. We are building towards war with Iran. Now, we talked about this last week, but war with Iran seems to be almost imminent. Talks continue to break down. There have been some competing conversations out there of whether or not we completely destroyed their nuclear capability or whether they are now weeks away from now getting nuclear capability. But regardless, it feels like we are heading towards some sort of military action with Iran. Matt, what do you make? Is this happening? Is it imminent?
As always, we record this on a Thursday and we release it on a Friday. And so by the time we release this, we may already be engaged in a military conflict with Iran. They've been laying the table for it. Steve said on Fox, we're probably 1 week away from Iran having industrial grade bomb making material. The Wall Street Journal reports that multiple experts and diplomats are disputing that. They're saying that it's absolutely not true. And there's substantial evidence that, in fact, Iran's nuclear capabilities were severely degraded in the earlier strikes that Trump ordered. Trump in the State of the Union said, we haven't heard the magic words that they're not going to acquire a nuclear weapon. And of course, Iran had actually tweeted those exact magic words only a few hours earlier. This all raises the question of why now? It's not necessarily that engaging with Iran militarily, going to war, is wrong. It's not on the face of it wrong. They are killing thousands of protesters. They are menacing their neighbors. They are fomenting instability around the world, and they are on the cusp of having nuclear capability. But it begs the question of why now? And of course, the obvious cynical answer to that is this might be another Trump wag the dog exercise of creating an international conflict in order to stoke a rally around the flag effect. That's a very cynical view of it, but we can't rule it out given what we know about this White House.
I don't think it's cynical at all. Trump is always looking to play to a crowd. Trump had a disastrous run over the last couple months. When you look at what's happened in Minnesota, you look at the sagging economy, you look at the fact that jobs last year were almost non-existent. Trump needs a reset. And for him, blowing up shit is his reset. It's an election year reset. We know we're going to get our ass kicked. And you had Mike Johnson say that if we lose the midterms, it will destroy the Trump presidency. So Trump is going to use every single lever he has at his ability to try and change that. And if that means going to war with Iran, then I think that's what's going to happen. I think it's more about the timing. Feels like he's trying to find the right placement in the TV schedule than anything else.
A major revelation, a possible smoking gun, emerged over the past week in the Epstein files story, and it's been underreported so far, but this may continue to burn, and by the time you're listening to it, it may have already become a headline-grabbing story. New reporting from NPR revealing that the Justice Department has withheld and removed certain Epstein-related files that reference allegations involving President Donald Trump, including more than 50 pages of FBI interviews and notes connected to a woman who previously accused Trump of sexual abuse when she was a minor. The Justice Department has declined to explain why these materials were not released, despite the bipartisan law mandating disclosure of Epstein-related records. I also want to give a hat tip to investigative reporter Roger Sollenberger, who has been driving this story on Substack and releasing a drumbeat of new revelations around the very credible accusation. This may be one of the things that Trump has been so nervous about in the Epstein files all along. Matt, what is your reaction to all of this? And is this story being underreported?
Story is being underreported. But the reality is, I think everybody assumes Trump is all over the Epstein files. And revelations like this are things that just could completely blow him out of the water. The blast radius of this becomes every Republican that has ever been out there that hasn't openly criticized or stood up. And what we're seeing even in the UK with former Prince Andrew, there are consequences. And it's remarkable how much most of my friends and colleagues just want to put their head in the sand and say there's nothing there. That's a moral and ethical problem. It's an electoral problem. It's an American problem. There's so many layers of this thing that will just haunt the Republic, and it's been botched from the beginning.
And there's connective tissue in all
Right.
of the stories we've talked about here today. We've talked about surveillance powers expanding because of tech-enabled capabilities that are owned by billionaires. We've talked about how that's driving war planning, war outcomes. We're talking about billionaires influencing battlefields. And we're talking about all of this connecting to a nexus of ultra wealthy, ultra powerful people who are both inside and outside of government and who are driving incredibly important decisions and covering up their own culpability. That's what ties all of this together. And I think that's what people find so revolting about the Epstein story and all of these stories put together. And speaking of really horrible, bad ideas that all tie together, let's get to our rotating segment of the week. Good idea, bad idea.
It's time for Good Idea or Bad Idea.
First up, let's talk about the SAVE Act. The Republicans in Congress are pushing a new bill that would nominally be a steroidal version of voter ID, but would also disenfranchise 21 million Americans who would lose the ability to vote. The new revelation this week is that Republican activists and advocacy groups are pushing Republican senators to turn this into a talking filibuster, to force Democrats to stand on the floor. Mr. Smith goes to Washington style to try to put a stop to this. And then they want to override the filibuster to force this down our throats. Matt, is this a good idea or a bad idea?
There's so much about this that's a bad idea. First, the filibuster and removing the threshold, bad idea. The reason it's a bad idea is simply because when Democrats are in power, and they will be in power soon, we don't want this, Republicans. Let's be clear. Now let's talk about the SAVE Act. Also, bad idea. Yes, we need voter ID. You need more than a Costco card to be able to vote. But this is a piece of legislation looking for a problem. And the reality of it, it's really just trying to set the stage that when we do get our ass kicked in November, we're going to try to blame some demon about elections and stolen votes that isn't, in fact, what's going to be true. This is all just a bad idea.
It's a good idea for the Republican Party. It's a bad idea for everyone else. I wrote much more about this in a new article out today in Newsweek that I'll also repost on the Worth Knowing Substack. So I don't want to step on that. And I have a feeling that we're going to be talking about this a lot more in the weeks to come. So I'd refer everyone to my article. Good idea for Republicans who are playing politics with the issue. Bad idea for the rest of us.
So at the State of the Union, Trump mentioned that our wonderful Vice President, J.D. Vance, is going to be upholding the fraud fight. And I think the quote was, in the amount we could save in fraud, we could balance our budget. The first salvo in this fraud fight, Minnesota, where we are now withholding funds until Governor Walz says that he has a plan to fight the fraud that was stolen by Somali pirates, as Trump referenced in his State of the Union. Matt, good idea, bad idea?
The question setup is inadvertently a little Trumpian, and it's agree with me if you think that mom and apple pie is good and you think illegal immigrants shooting everybody is bad. Fighting fraud is good. This is a bad, ugly political maneuver. This was the entire reason for the incursion by ICE paramilitary forces into Minnesota in the first place was to try to make Tim Walz and Democrats in the state look bad to murdered American citizens later. We're seeing the consequences of them playing politics. They said, oh, we'll withdraw the ICE forces if you'll agree to give us your voter roll files. The whole thing is a transparent, political, partisan, craven exercise that's absolutely horrible. Bad doesn't say it well enough.
Look, we need to fight fraud. And there is waste, fraud, and abuse in Washington. First of all, I thought that's what Doge was going to do, but now I guess we need JD Vance to do this. I love the idea of fighting fraud. I hate the way we're going about it. I think this is just another shit show, political battle where we attack the states and we use partisan politics to do it. So I'm actually going to say this is a bad idea.
President Trump's nominee for Surgeon General, Casey Means, has declined this week to definitively rule out a link between vaccines and autism. For the record, decades and decades of scientific studies show that there is no causal relationship between vaccines and autism. Matt, is Casey's declination a good idea or a bad idea?
Oh my God, this is just, it's a bad idea. Come on, guys. As Republicans, I know we don't always trust the science. The science is pretty clear on this one. And the primary role of government should be actually to protect Americans, and vaccines have worked. We've long seen it. And so it does feel like we could just stand up there and say, no, there is no link, and stop being so fucking weird on shit.
If you are the mumps, this is a great idea. You are pro mumps and you are anti-vaccines. If you are the measles, this is a spectacular idea. If you are rubella, you are pro Casey Means. For the rest of us, this is a fucking terrible idea. We can move on.
So the Republican majority is razor thin in the House. Now, Rep. Tony Gonzalez, who is in a primary in Texas, has been under fire lately for a scandal. And this is a tragic scandal. It was a staffer. She's killed herself. It is absolutely horrible. There are some Republicans out there who are out, like Massey and Nancy Mace and some others, who have called on Tony Gonzalez to resign his post. He is saying he will not. There are other Republicans out there saying he absolutely should not resign because, well, we would lose the majority. Not good idea, bad idea.
For him to resign. So the context here is that Representative Gonzalez was having an affair with this staffer who later committed suicide. And the text messages that have come to light are troubling. Clearly, there was an inappropriate relationship going on here. Mike Johnson, I am no fan of House Speaker Mike Johnson, has said, let's let this play out. Let's let the voters decide. I actually am going to zig on this a little bit and say it is a good idea for him not to resign. I am a judicial system purist. I believe that if there is a crime at issue here, it should be adjudicated in a court of law, with rules of evidence, with cross-examination, with a judge and a jury. I think if this is a political scandal, which it clearly is, in addition to being a horrible tragedy, then that is for the voters to decide. If, as evidence emerges, especially through an ethics investigation in the House, if the House then decides that this person is unfit to sit in the chamber, then he should be unseated through that official process. Now, politically, obviously, Mike Johnson is not going to do that because it would imperil the Republican majority. But that is what should happen.
I don't disagree with any of that, but I think it's a bad idea that he doesn't resign. There is a primary, and there's an opportunity in the next week or so for voters in Texas to choose someone. The right thing is for him to resign. let the voters make a decision on the other candidates. We're going to win the seat. We're going to keep the majority. I think it's a bad idea. I think it's a bad look for Republicans.
I will say, I agree with your point that as a human being, what he did was scummy. And if he had any self-respect, he would resign. Speaking of people with no self-respect, we have to talk about the viral video that emerged, including on the Worth Knowing YouTube channel, where you can see this video of FBI Director Kash Patel shotgunning beers after U.S. hockey men's gold medal winning championship in the Olympics. Let's take a look. Oh my goodness. Matt, was this a good idea?
Great idea. I love this. America just won the gold medal first time since 1980. There's a lot of excitement there. Yeah, they want to make a lot that he probably flew a government plane over and lies the FBI. And there's a lot of this out there. We're celebrating America. And if I could shotgun a beer as well as he did, I would say, yeah, let's go do this. But it's a great idea. Celebrate the victory, celebrate America. Let's just have fun.
I'm with you. I think this is a great idea. We all know that Kash Patel is an unhinged lunatic with scared deer in the headlights eyes at resting state. And I think living up to his brand is absolutely fantastic. It would have been better if this had been, let's say, not a government funded flight over there for a little excursion to benefit himself and be a fanboy. It would have been better if he had partied with, say, a Democrat and said, you know what? Politics is politics. We're all Americans here. Let's celebrate an American victory. That would have been better.
And I know you caught this while you're watching the news. On Fox last week and this week, new ads have been popping up with Donald Trump selling brand new Trump watches, as he says, from your favorite president. So Trump time, $500. There has been a little bit of an uproar, even from Fox News viewers who have said, okay, this feels a little inappropriate given where we are in the economy and the prices. Matt, he's hawking goods as president. What do you think?
Not just a good idea, a great idea. Unlike many of Trump's current scams, grifts, frauds, and emoluments, this is something that people can understand. He is hawking chintzy watches. Everyone knows that this is what carnival barkers do and people who sell knockoff merchandise on New York City streets. If you've ever, I grew up there. If anyone's ever visited, easy to find the folks who sell the knockoff goods. This is who Trump is. I love it when he reveals who he is. This isn't hard to follow like prediction markets or cryptocurrency or the other scuzzy ways that he's making of billions of dollars while the rest of us experience high prices and economic struggles. This is straightforward. I am a grifting con man. You're welcome. Great idea.
Yeah, I think the Trump watches can go with the ties and the shoes and all the great apparel that you can have with Trump. As a free market capitalist, I love the idea of people being able to sell whatever garbage they want to sell. There is a point where I think the president of the United States should not be an infomercial kind of guy. And so I don't love this, but so I'm going to go bad idea. But
You think? Yeah. Let's wrap it up on this one. Our favorite judge, perhaps America's greatest jurist, Judge Eileen Cannon, last seen in the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case, has popped up again. In the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case, this time blocking the release of special counsel Jack Smith's report on findings. This is the kind of report that is traditionally released without problem by special counsels throughout time. But Judge Cannon has found a tortured legal reason, despite many legal scholars saying that this is absolute stinking MAGA horseshit, to block the release of the report. Matt, is this a good idea?
No, this is a bad idea. This is a horrible idea. We should have transparency. We should be able to see and read these things so that we can actually determine whether or not Jack Smith acted appropriately or not. Look, Trump was swept into office because he wanted to drain the swamp. He was swept into office a second time based on transparency and this attack on lawfare. Release the damn reports. Stop blocking this stuff so we can actually see it. Same with the Epstein files. Same with the Jack Smith report.
The only thing about this that I think is a good idea is that it adds another entry into the eventual judicial impeachment of Eileen Cannon. It is another brick in the wall of how she is a completely unfit, incompetent MAGA hack of a non-jurist who never should have come within spitting distance of the federal bench. And on that note, let's go to our weekly segment. That's bullshit.
Bullshit. Bullshit. Bullshit.
Bullshit.
A bullshit?
In politics, there are exaggerations, and then there are numbers that violate the laws of arithmetic and therefore go from light boasting to total bullshit. So here are Donald Trump's top 5 mathematically impossible claims. And to be clear, these aren't partisan disagreements. These are math problems.
President Trump repeated his false claim that he's lowered drug prices by as much as 600%.
As Seth pointed out,
Okay, one more time. You can't lower anything more than 100%. 100% is free.
a 600% price cut means they're paying you to take drugs. By the way, while he was at it, Trump didn't stop there.
We've cut drug prices by 1,200, 1,300, 1,400, 1,500%.
So congratulations. According to Trump, CVS now owes you a small condo.
President Trump, your DOJ agencies have seized more than 22 million fentanyl pills, which saved 258 million lives.
Amazing, since the U.S. has about 342 million people living in it. About 3/4 of them apparently were dying and no one noticed. Even defeating Thanos only saved half the population.
I want to address a claim that President Trump made in a op-ed to the Wall Street Journal that he has secured commitments for $18 trillion in foreign investment into the U.S.
I want to address that one too. The entire U.S. economy is around $31 trillion. And in the past quarter century, the biggest annual foreign direct investment we've gotten is under $500 billion. So Trump's claiming that he's bringing in more than half the entire U.S. economy. If our country was suddenly 50% more prosperous, I think we'd notice.
Donald Trump's Department of Homeland Security put out probably one of the craziest tweets, suggesting that in the next year there could be 100 million deportations. I'm not making this up.
According to the Center for Immigration Studies, between naturalized citizens and undocumented immigrants, we have about 50 million total immigrants living in the U.S. So I guess we're going to deport them all twice, including naturalized citizens, like Elon Musk.
Every boat we knock out, we save 25,000 American lives.
There have been about 45 of these boat strikes so far, which means Trump is saying that we've saved 1.1 million lives. Actual U.S. drug overdose deaths are about 100,000 a year. So we've not only saved all these lives, but according to Trump, we reincarnated everyone from the last decade. Math, numbers. It's the very definition of objective reality. And when they stop meaning anything, all you're left with is bullshit. With that, let's go to our final dose of hope. And this week for our dose of hope, we'd like to offer our alternative State of the Union.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Vice President, thank you for trimming your beard and toning down your eyeliner slightly.
Members of Congress and my fellow Americans, let's not kid ourselves. The State of the Union is complicated.
We're struggling right now, and not just because of the issues that dominate our political discourse, the difficulty of affording daily life, rising bills, expensive healthcare, a shortage of good jobs, and incredible prosperity for a small number of people lucky enough to work in high-tech industries, while many others feel left behind.
But let's not make the mistake of confusing the state of our country or our politics with the state of our union. They're not the same thing. And yes, our union faces real challenges. About 2/3 of Americans believe the president doesn't have the right priorities. Large majorities think the country is headed in the wrong direction. Polling shows many Americans are so politically divided, they don't even want their children marrying someone from the other major political party. We often don't share the same basic facts anymore, or even the same sense of reality.
These are serious problems, and we don't do ourselves any favors by pretending otherwise. But we faced challenges before, different in form, but no less severe. We've nearly lost the Revolutionary War on the island of Manhattan before it truly began. We fought a civil war over whether human beings should be enslaved. We endured the upheaval of civil rights in Vietnam and a president caught conspiring to commit crimes.
We felt grief when the Twin Towers fell. We lived through a pandemic that locked us inside our homes and then argued about when it was safe to leave our homes.
And yet, if you were asked most Americans today whether they wanted this nation to break up, whether they wanted to end this marriage, they'd say no.
And that's the most important thing. We may be angry, divided, straining, sometimes to the breaking point, but almost all of us still want things to get better. We still want this experiment to work.
And that matters. That's everything.
Because on this show, I mean, in this State of the Union, we believe that there's nothing wrong with America that cannot be fixed by what's right with America. We've come back from the brink before. We can come back from the brink again.
And here's the quiet truth. Nations don't fall apart because people argue. They fall apart when people stop believing the argument is worth having. For all our noise, the yelling, the cable news theatrics, the algorithm-fed outrage, the Trump of it all, Americans are still showing up.
We're still voting. We're still starting businesses. We're still making major scientific breakthroughs. We're still volunteering. And yes, we're still arguing loudly because we still think it matters. That's not a country in collapse. That's a country in friction.
So no, the state of our union isn't perfect. It isn't tidy. It isn't comfortable, but it is resilient.
And if history is any guide, resilience, not comfort, is what carries nations forward. And on that State of the Union dose of hope, for Matt, I'm Matt. We'll see you next time.